I'm really also very happy tonight to introduce you to Danielle, standing right here, our bat expert. And Danielle's been working and volunteering on bat projects since 2011. You don't look that old, Danielle. And assisting Greater Vancouver bat research since 2016. She gained a passion and appreciation for bats pursuing her master's. Danielle has taken on the role of regional coordinator for the bat programs of BC, bcbats.ca. And this role provides advice and guidance to homeowners, businesses, and municipalities to help with management and conservation of bats. Danielle likes to teach about bats and enjoys teaching kids as well. As a wildlife educator, she provides programs for lots of different groups, and I'll probably get you to talk about that as you go. Anyway, hopefully you'll enjoy learning more about bats the night before Halloween. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And I welcome everybody to the Bat Talk tonight. Thank you so much for showing up. So we're celebrating Bat Week. So the last week of October is known internationally as Bat Week. Okay, this is a time where we're seeing these scary pictures about bats. Decorations are going up. You know, bats are always in a negative content around Halloween, and they're often like the bad guy during movies as well. And so people have a lot of fear about bats. And so Bat Week is a time where we want people to think about bats, but think about them in a new light, and think about their importance and not be afraid of them. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, so we've got bats flying over the city. I get calls every year that there's a bat in my neighborhood and I want them removed. People freak out. They see bats and they scream. And that's because of all these fears that we have with bats. Oh, what's going on here? A lot of these misconceptions with bats. So people think about vampire bats and that bats are going to attack you and suck your blood. They think about bats being blind and getting caught in your hair. And so I just wanted to talk about some of these misconceptions. So there are vampire bats in the world. Okay, they do not turn into Dracula. They are not found in Transylvania. They are found in Central South America. And they do feed on the blood of animals. Okay, it's rare that they would feed on the blood of humans. And they are very important for medical purposes. So because they drink blood, doctors have made medicine to help with blood clots. Okay, so we shouldn't fear them. We should be protecting these vampire bats. Very important for our medicine. A lot of our bats around the world are using echolocation. Bats are nocturnal animals. They are made to be out at nighttime. They have great vision. They are not blind. They're not going to bump into you. They're not going to attack you and get into your hair. So if you have bats that are flying overhead, so often they'll flutter fairly close to your head. They're not trying to grab your hair to nest because bats do not nest. What they do is they roost. They don't build anything. They just hang in crevices. And if they're coming close to you, it's because your body has attracted insects. And those bats are actually trying to eat those insects and they're trying to help you. So if you stay calm, you'll notice the bats will feed and then they'll go on their way. So no need to fear them. If you look at the bat specimens that I brought with me, you'll look that they do look like rodents. They look like little mice with wings. They are not related to mice in any way. Okay, they're more closely related to humans phylogenetically than they are to rodents. So we do not want to think of them as rodents. We want to disassociate the words pest and nest when we talk about bats because they are very important wildlife. And again, they're not building anything or traveling through our homes, and they don't have a need to chew and damage. Okay. What Bat Week is all about is this picture here. We're going from that scary picture of the bat to the cute, cuddly picture of the bat. Okay, so this is the same bat species. This is during our research. We caught the bat obviously it's upset with us and it's screaming, you know, to let go, or maybe calling for help or telling the other bats stay away from here. And then after a couple minutes, it realizes we're not going to harm it. Okay, so if you look at this picture here on the left-hand side, they're very cute. You know, they're very adorable little creatures. Here in British Columbia, we have 15 species of bats. So there are 2 that have white squares on them. These are species of bats that we've detected acoustically. We have not caught them in hand yet. So that's why it says 15 to 17. It's not that we don't know. It's just until we catch them in hand, we have 15 species of bats in British Columbia. So you can see some of the differences that we have. In the case that I brought with me, there's 6 of those 15 species of bats. So you can get a closer look at them. So all of our bats in British Columbia go through these bat seasons. We have a very small fall time, and we have a very small spring. And this is times when the bats are migrating from their summer habitat to the winter habitat. Most of the bats' life cycles are winter and summer. So in the summertime, that's when they're active, they're feeding, they're having their baby. And in the winter time, they're hibernating. Okay, they have no food. So all of our bats in British Columbia, all the bats in Canada are eating insects. And so in the wintertime, they have no food. So they're either going to migrate or they're going to hibernate. So I want to talk about what bats are doing in the fall. So we're still here in BC, in Vancouver, you know, we're just to the end of October. We still have some mild weather. You know, it was just absolutely beautiful yesterday, right? And we're still getting the odd bat report. So our bats hibernate a little bit later than they do in other parts of British Columbia and Canada. And so there are times where you can still encounter our bats that are moving through their fall migration. And you're often going to encounter these single roosting bats, and they're going to be mostly above doorways. They love being above doorways. They are protected, it's sheltered. We got traffic going in and out with people, so they don't have to worry about predators. They're often quite high above the door. So if they're above your doorway, please just allow them to stay. They're trying to fatten up to survive through that winter. So any disturbances could cause them to lose fat, and they may perish and not make it through the winter. So we want to allow them to stay. These single roosting bats are going to stick around for a couple of days. Earlier, like in August or September, they may stick around for a week or 2 as they fatten up. But right now, they won't last too long as they move towards their winter site as we're getting closer to our colder temperatures. So this just shows some of the locations where single roosting bats may occur. The most commons that we have is above our doorway and inside patio umbrellas. You may also see them on the side of the wall, on trees in the park, behind your windowsills, and sometimes they're in odd locations like on fences, like this bat here that was in Richmond. And occasionally they can get into your house, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So again, these roost locations for these single roosting bats are going to be mostly exposed sites in the early part of the fall season, which would be the end of July, early August. A lot of those single roosting bats are going to be your juveniles, the males, as they move out of the roost sites. Right now, you can have adults and juveniles that may be single roosting. Again, they're going to be temporary. The biggest thing I get is I have a bat above my door. It's been there for 3 days. I think it's dead. And my first question is, have you checked on the bat's location after sunset? And most people say no. And so the bats are nocturnal, right? During the day, it's going to be there. It's going to be sleeping. But after sunset, go out, look about half an hour after sunset. If the bat is still there, maybe there's an issue. Maybe it's unhealthy. But think, is it cold out? Is there lots of insects? Is it warm? If you have ideal conditions for it to be feeding, then the bat should be feeding. If it's cold or if it's rainy or windy, the bat may stay. Okay, so think about those things, but generally they move on their own, and we just ask you not to disturb them. Okay. It's during the fall time where we often get calls about bats inside homes as well. Again, this happens a lot in August, September. This is a video of someone who had a bat in their bathroom. So the best thing to do is to remain calm, close off the area, open a door or window to the outside. Again, think about the circumstance. If this is happening after sunset or early in the nighttime, the bat is going to go outside. If it's first thing in the morning, like the bat came in at dawn as you're going to work, the bat may not go outside. It doesn't want to be outside. It wants to sleep, right? It might find somewhere to sleep. So think about these situations. Try to remain calm, close it off. If you can't, allow the bat to settle on the wall. As the bat settles on the wall, give it a little bit of time. It's going to put itself in a torpor state where it wants to save its energy. And so you can easily approach a bat and cup it like you would a spider and then remove it to the outside. Now, I always tell people if you're going to do that, wear gloves and wear long sleeves just to try to minimize any contact that you might come with the bat. And as you bring it outside, you want to put that container up against a tree or at the base of a tree. Okay, don't leave the container up. The bat won't be able to crawl out of it. If you look at the bat specimens, you'll see they only have little tiny thumbnails and toenails to crawl. So the container needs to be on its side. Okay, and always report the encounter of a bat in your house to the bat program. Okay, in the fall and the winter, as we're getting to November, it gets to be colder here in Vancouver. We can have temporary bats as well, or hibernating bats. And these bats are often going to be found in summer homes, areas that are cold that people are not using at this time of year, or we can find bats in our basements. So in the summertime, bats like warm locations. In the wintertime, bats like cold locations. Okay. Grounded bats are something that we may come across at this time. So as they're moving through their hibernation site, if there's not enough insects and they're getting weak, the bat may fall to the ground. Okay, grounded bats we may find all year, but this time of year we may come across them because they might be just weak or dehydrated. Okay. Other ways that we may come in contact with bats is that they might fly through our chimneys and get into the house. Okay. So if you do have lots of bats in your neighborhood, which if you live in Vancouver, you do, it's always good to put like a little cap on your chimney so that bats can't accidentally fall in and then get into your house. If you have gardens, if you have any invasive plants, especially like burdock or anything that's kind of sticky, bats may stick to those and they might not be able to get out. And so these are just some ways that you might come across some grounded bats or some dead bats. It's really important to understand that when a bat is on the ground, it can't fly very well. So our bats here in BC, they don't have free legs. Their legs are inside their tail membranes. You can see it very well on two of the specimens that are in the box. And so they don't perch like birds do, and they can't take flight off the ground. So what they need to do is they need to climb up a tree, and then they'd rest, they'd go upside down, they drop, spread their wings, and they'd fly away. So if you come across a grounded bat, what we want to do is we want to relocate it. We don't want pets to come in contact with it, and we definitely do not want any children to come in contact with the bats. So we always want to approach it very slowly, see if it's alive. You can take a broom or you can take a shovel and wrap it in a terry cloth, put it next to the bat and kind of convince it to crawl onto it, cling to it, and then carry it low to the base of a tree where it can then climb to safety. If the bat is dead, we collect these bats for research purposes and for monitoring as well. So it's really important if you come across a grounded bat or a dead bat to report it to the program. So right now, starting November 1st to May 31st, we have a program that's called our White Nose Syndrome Surveillance Program, where we collect the dead bats. They are sent to a lab and they're tested for this fungus. So in this case, what you'd want to do, again, wear gloves, wear long sleeves. I always say that just to minimize any direct contact you may have with the bat. You want to take the bat, wrap it in a paper towel, put it in a Ziploc bag, double bag it, write the location, the date and the location, your contact number on the bag. I always stick it in a yogurt container, sour cream container, and put it in my freezer and label it. And then myself or another member of the program will come and collect the bat so it can be used for research. And the reason why this is so important is because we have this fungus called white nose syndrome that is devastating our bat populations in North America. So this is a fungus that is found in the caves where bats are hibernating. It's a fungus that will grow on the bat as it goes into hibernation. And so what it does is it puts the hyphae of the fungus through the wings of the bat, causes irritation, causes the bats to wake up, which uses their fat reserve. And so if the bats go out looking for food and water and they can't find it, researchers are finding dead bats on the snow. So whole colonies can be wiped out depending on the species. So this fungus was introduced into North America from Europe. How it was introduced is not quite known, but they do know that it came from Europe and came into a cave outside of Albany, New York. And from there, for the first few years, it was spreading about 200 kilometers a year. So all those dots on that map is showing the spread of the fungus. The different shades are different years of the spread. In 2010, it reached Canada and it went into Quebec and it spread into the Maritimes, and it spread, they just found it in Alberta recently. We have found the fungus in British Columbia outside of Grand Forks. We have not found the disease yet. So that's why there's a circle instead of a full square. So the fungus has been found here, but we have not found it on a bat yet. But it is only a matter of time, unfortunately. At the moment, there are 12 species of the 47 that are found in North America that are affected by the fungus, where populations are declining. There are 3 species in Canada. 2 are found in BC, so the little brown bat and the northern long-eared myotis are both found in BC, and they're endangered because of this fungus. And there's another one out east called the tricolored bat that is also endangered. There are 2 additional species in the States that are endangered because of this fungus. So some of the colonies, when the fungus gets in, it will wipe out 98% of the colony. And that would be your little browns and your northern myotis, where the populations are devastated from it. At the moment, there is no cure for this fungus. And so it's really important that we monitor it, and we have citizen scientists that will help with our monitoring by reporting the dead bats, so we can do actions to help the bats. So there are little things that people can do that researchers are doing regionally to help the bats, but at the moment, there's nothing we can do to spread across North America. And the reason why it's so devastating is because our bats only have 1 pup a year. And so when you only have 1 pup and not all females are reproducing, if they've, went through a really bad winter, they may not decide to reproduce in the summer. Recoveries are very, very slow. So this is our website. This is the homepage that you'll get. There's lots of places on there where you can contact us. You can find out what to do if you have a bat in your house or how to relocate it. There are different regions. So I'm the coordinator for the Metro Vancouver Sea to Sky. So I'm basically north of Pemberton all the way to Langley and some of the Gulf Islands like Bowen Island and Gambier Island. And we have, I think, about 19 coordinators. So if you have friends in British Columbia, let them know that there are coordinators in other regions. There's also a program in Alberta, and there's a program that kind of goes Saskatchewan to Quebec as well. So lots of programs around Canada and in the States as well to report your bats. If there's any contact with a pet, you want to let your veterinarian know about it immediately. And if anybody comes into skin contact with a bat, you need to report it to the health authority. So I've got the Vancouver Coastal Health number and the Fraser Health number up there. So those are direct numbers. So Fraser Health is Burnaby East, and Vancouver Coastal Health is Vancouver and then North Shore up to Pemberton. And the Gulf Islands. So you need to report it to them. because bats can carry the rabies virus. It's very, very rare that a bat would have the rabies virus. About less than half of a percentage of bats, or 1 in 200, or even less than that, would carry the rabies virus. But you can't tell if a bat is rabid unless you euthanize it and they dissect their brain. So as a precaution, we say stay away from daytime bats. If you should come across one, never touch a bat with your bare hands. Okay. Bats keep to themselves. They're roosting up high above your doorway. There's no need to disturb them. So you shouldn't come in contact with them. The biggest thing we have is them falling to the ground, and cats that bring them into homes for homeowners to deal with. So those are the two main reasons why you come across bats. And then, we also have a tab on the website for reporting the dead bats for white nose syndrome. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the fall migration. So not all of our species hibernate. Most of our species in BC will hibernate through the winter. And we do have one species, the silver-haired bat, which is on here, that we have found to be hibernating in wood piles, especially in the Lower Mainland. But these 4 bat species, including the silver-haired bat, they are migratory species. So they will move south and not hibernate. So Vancouver is kind of mild. We do have the silver-haired bat that will be in the Vancouver area, but in other parts of BC, the silver-haired bat may be migrating to Vancouver, or maybe even going down into the States. So these migratory species can be carriers for white nose syndrome. The Mexican free-tailed one is confirmed to be a carrier. They are also tree species, so they prefer to, these 3, the eastern red bat, the silver-haired bat, and the hoary bat, are tree species, so they prefer to be in treed environments. So hopefully, they won't get in contact with white nose syndrome because it's in caves. But these species of bats are highly affected by wind turbines. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize, is that when wind turbine farms are going up, there's lots of studies for migratory birds, but not as many for bats. And when turbines started going up in Ontario way back in the early 2000s, there was no studies for migratory bats at that time. And it's been an increase in problem, and a lot of researchers are lobbying to help protect the bats as they migrate, because some of our bat species, especially this hoary bat, may become extinct because of wind turbines. So these are just some facts that I got, that there's over 100,000 bats that die every year at wind turbine farms. In Canada, they predict that there's 15 to 100 bats that die per turbine per year. 3 species of bats that are on verge of extinction. So that's your hoary bat, your silver-haired bat, and your red bat. We have a big push to go green in BC, and they're going to be putting out more wind turbine farms. And at the moment, the environmental assessment are not that great. And so we need to lobby as a group, as public, to let our government know that we need to protect these species. So with the wind turbines, there's 2 problems for the bats. One is that they may strike the blade. So they do have echolocation, and they can see the blade, but some of the bats seem to be attracted to the post, is what they were saying, which will increase their chances of getting struck by the blade. But also, because bats are mammals, they have the same lungs that we have. And so when those blades are spinning, behind the blade, there's a low pressure that can cause the lungs to collapse, and they can just drop out of the sky as well. So there's 2 ways they can die from these wind turbines. And with the push for green energy, what we want is that when companies are putting out these wind turbines, that they are required to do mitigation and to have regulation so that they can operate not operate at times when the bats are migrating, so that the fatalities will be reduced. And that professor from UNBC that was in the video, the woman, she's been working on this for several years, trying to help. And hopefully we can help protect these bats. So here are our bats again. Oh, it didn't work. Okay. Here are bats again in BC. And they're very important. out there eating the insects. That's what they're doing for us is they're out there protecting our forests, they're protecting the food that the farmers grow, protecting our gardens, and then of course helping with those insects that are biting us. Around the world, there are many insects that can carry diseases, and so the bats can help control the disease as well. So lots of studies have been done around the world talking about just the value of bats for our ecosystems. So having bats on farms, lots of research in the States on corn crops and cotton crops are showing that, having the bats there, the farmers are not losing as much yield. They're not required to use as much pesticides, not as much operational costs. So worldwide, they estimate that bats are saving farmers trillions of dollars. Now, the study that was done in the States with the corn and cotton showed that just in the States, bats are saving farmers billions of dollars. So very important for our ecosystems. And I was part of a research team in 2016 where we looked at bats on farms from Delta to Abbotsford. And we found that bats are eating over 200 different types of insects. And of those, 80 were pests that were on the farm. So very important here in Canada as well. So they have these bat seasons, as I mentioned. And, in the summertime, that's when the bats are active. That's when we're seeing the bats mostly, from April until August. That's when we have the most activity. And so that's when people think about bats and the threats that bats have. But really, bats experience threats year round, and they only have that one baby. So it's really important that we protect bats year round. And in those migration periods in the spring and in the fall, the bats are either trying to fatten up to survive the winter, or they come out of winter extremely weak. And so when we have those single roosting bats above our doorways, we really want to allow them to stay there so that they can, either survive into winter or be able to reproduce and have that pup. So here are our bats again in BC. And these squares here that are appearing are showing the ones that are listed. So we have our blue listed species, or provincially blue listed species, which are special concern. We have our provincially red listed species, which are threatened in British Columbia. And the two orange squares are the ones that are endangered in Canada. Okay, but then we also have the hoary bat, the silver-haired bat, and the eastern red bat that are not, the hoary bat and the silver-haired bat do not have squares on them. But the hoary bat should have a yellow square. Its population is almost becoming extinct because of these wind turbines. And hopefully soon it will be listed and we can help, protect those better as well. We have a lot of fear that people have about bats. And I get reports of people finding bats above their doorway and hitting them with a broom and killing them. And we need to wipe away that fear, and most of that fear stems from rabies. People are afraid that they'll get rabies from the bats. But as I mentioned, if you never touch a bat, you don't have to worry about rabies. The chances of rabies in the bat population is extremely low. Okay. What you're looking for is any unusual behavior. So daytime flying bats may be rabid. We have so much construction in the Lower Mainland all year round that sometimes that construction can cause a bat to come out during the daytime. So it may not be a rabid bat that you're seeing. If the bat is coming out, feeding quickly in your yard and going to a tree to go to sleep, it's probably a bat that was disturbed, right? But any daytime bat, be careful. Any bat that seems aggressive, that's flying at you and keeps flying at you, rather flying over your head and eating insects and going on its way, be wary of those ones. Let your neighbors know that there's a bat that's in the neighborhood. If a bat does have rabies, it will die within 4 to 20 days and generally leaves the colony. So the rabies is 100% treatable. Okay, so if you have any contact with a bat, contact public health and they will assess the situation. Okay, what we want to be careful of is our cats. Make sure that they're vaccinated against rabies because they're the ones that often bring in the bat encounters. Any bat that's on the ground, be careful about those. And if you wake up in your bedroom and there's a bat in your bedroom in the morning, you want to report that as well, because we don't know what the bat was doing while you were sleeping. Okay. So rabies is the only disease that you need to worry about when it comes to bats. A lot of people are afraid that the guano, so the bat droppings, also have diseases. In British Columbia, there is no known disease associated with guano. In other parts of Canada, other parts of the world, guano may have a disease, but in BC, we don't have to worry about it. So in Canada, in Alberta East, there is a disease called histoplasmosis that can be found in guano. And this is a fungus that grows in the guano. It's more associated with chickens than it is with bats, because it can be found on chicken farms, and the fungus will grow in bird guano as well. And that's a respiratory disease that you can get while cleaning it up. So if you have guano on your property, we always recommend wear a mask and gloves when you're sweeping it up. But that's because it looked a lot like mice or rat droppings, and they can carry diseases in BC. Okay, so you want to protect yourself. You can also collect the guano and use it in your garden. It makes a great fertilizer, but we ask you not to remove it off your site because you could spread white nose syndrome. So just leave it on your property. Okay. So just to recap, times where you could see bats, these single roosting bats, we want to try to allow them to stay. Okay, we don't want to cause any disturbances. Let other people know that the bat is in the area. So I had someone in Vancouver that had a bat above their doorway, and they put a little sign on their door. It was an apartment building. They put a little sign on their door and they say, "I know about my little critter. It's okay. Please do not disturb it." And I thought that was very nice of them to do that. I've had one in Delta that actually spent a month in a stairwell in an apartment building, and an outside stairwell, and they informed all the neighbors about it, and it was up high. So as long as it's out of reach of children and out of reach of pets, we ask you to please allow the bats to stay. If you know of anybody that has a maternity colony, so bats in the city, we don't have many trees. They go to buildings, and that's where the females will form these colonies and have their pups. We call these maternity roosts, and they're usually there from April until the end of July, early August. If you do have bats in the building, usually they're on the outside of the building, not on the inside. And in the summertime, they are protected by the Wildlife Act. So you can't do anything, you can't exclude them. But if you do not want them there, you can work with the program. We can talk to you about a partial exclusion or a full exclusion. And we want to make sure that you're following the proper documents so no bats are harmed or killed. So there are documents on our website that talks about living with bats that you can read. And then there's also a document called Managing Bats in Buildings, which I brought with me if anybody wants to take a copy. And it talks about the exclusion time. So basically from September 1st, until April is a time where we can exclude the bats safely. We don't capture bats, we don't trap them. What we do is we seal up the holes that they're using. So temporarily you can use netting or tubes so the bats can fly out but can't get back in. But you do this September to April when the bats are not using the building. Other ways to help, minimize those disturbances, turn off your lights, allow the bats to have a nice dark place to feed in your gardens, report any bat activity, dead bats, bat roosts to the program so we can help people manage them and monitor them. Always seek advice, especially if you want to do like a bat garden or build a bat box like the one that I have. A lot of the designs that you find online or in stores may not be appropriate for our BC bats. And so we want to make sure that you're using the right criteria. And with bat boxes, we always want to make sure that the homeowner is going to maintain them and monitor them annually. Okay. If you do visit any caves, so we do have caves on the Vancouver Island, you want to make sure that you're doing the decontamination that they have there. Or if you're going down to the States, always make sure that if you're going into a cave, that you're cleaning your shoes off. They should have something there because that's kind of how white nose syndrome started to be spread. So we want to definitely make sure that we're not spreading it. The biggest things that you can do to help bats is just advocating for bats and teaching people about what you learned here. Telling people that bats are very interesting animals. They're very important animals. They're in trouble and we can help them, right? Just allowing them to stay above your door is going to help the bats, okay? And together we can work together so that everybody sees the bats as our cute little animals that they are, and not the scary ones that we see at Halloween. So thank you very much. So the question was, what is their lifespan? So it depends on the species. The oldest bat that was recorded through research was, I think, 42 years old. So they are very small animals and they can live to be quite old. And because of that, they are studied for medical purposes. They're very important for medicine, as well as for helping with our plants. A lot of bats don't make it that long. About 30 to 40% of the pups that are born every year will perish. They will not get enough fat to survive our winter. So not only do they only have one baby, but a big percentage of them will not survive that first winter.
Because?
They don't get enough fat to survive because they don't have food. So the pups are born at the end of June, and in some areas they're hibernating, they're migrating in September. They have a very short window to grow up, learn everything, and build that fat to migrate or hibernate.
So I live near Trout Lake on Clark Park.
Yeah.
And that's where I see bats is Trout Lake quite a bit. And I find them really exciting. I actually love bats. And so but I'm wondering, what about initiatives? Could some of the parks and a part of a orchard, Clark Park Orchard, like, could we put up some bat boxes and things like that? Would that be something, or is the city doing anything related to that to provide somewhere for them to live comfortably?
So we have someone here that lives by Trout Lake and sees lots of bats. So Trout Lake is a great area to watch bats, especially over the water. At sunset, you can watch them feeding. So she was wondering what you can do to help the bats and if Vancouver is doing anything. So there is that orchard that's just north of Trout Lake. Copley Orchard. So yeah, they have some bat boxes that they put up. I believe they took some down. They were having a lot of problems with flickers that were attacking their boxes and destroying them, which will happen sometimes with your boxes. But yeah, I've worked with Copley Orchard, to create some habitat for the bats. I've also worked with the city of Vancouver, so they've put up bat boxes on golf courses. And there's a lot of Metro Vancouver parks in the area that have some bat boxes and that are doing initiatives as well.
I have a question about observing bats, and it's because they're, as you say, they're nocturnal, and it's pretty dark at that time. And I've been advised to use, and I'm just wondering your thoughts on using, if you're going to use a light of some sort, so that you can see them better. It might be they're very fast, but at least you can see them. That you use a red filter type of light. Is that still the red guidance to take into account?
Yeah, so someone is asking about watching bats and whether they can use a light or red filter light to watch the bats. So I always recommend not using any lights when you're watching bats. You want to enjoy them in their natural habitat. We don't want to be shining lights on them. Some of them are very sensitive to lights. Red light doesn't seem to be as sensitive for bats. There are people that will put up red lights to monitor bats. The best time to watch bats is really that half an hour, 45 minutes after sunset, because that's when you have the most activity. They're just coming out to feed. They're going to be lower to the ground. They're going to be feeding and drinking the water. So if you go to Trout Lake or Jericho Beach or Stanley Park and go to the ponds, you can really see them come down low. Ambleside is someone said they're from the North Shore. Ambleside is a great place to go watch them by that pond by the golf course. And at that time, you have enough light left in the sky that you can see their silhouette and you can really enjoy them. And so that's what I recommend for people, is to go out during that time when you have that 30-minute window where you can see lots of activity, and you want to try to position yourself So that when you're like, if you're standing at Ambleside, you want to be standing so that you're looking out at the ocean, so that you don't have the golf course or the trees behind you, because that's going to be too dark and it's going to be hard to see the bats. So if you angle yourself in a way, so if you're at Trout Lake, angle yourself so that you're looking more south than north because there's less trees, and you're going to have more of that sky behind you to watch the bats. So that's what I recommend. I recommend not bringing lights and shining them on the bats.
I'm gonna ask you a couple from your chat.
Oh, yes.
Saying I'm going to repeat them.
No worries.
Are BC bats involved in pollination at all or not at all? Because they're only insect eaters.
Okay, so are BC bats involved with pollination? So we do have bats around the world. I think there's about 300, 500 plants that are pollinated by bats around the world. We do have a bat in southern BC in the Okanagan called the pallid bat. And if you look at my display, you'll notice that the range of the pallid bat goes from the southern states up into the Okanagan Valley, up into a Soyuz area. And down at the southern range in the states, they have shown that the pallid bat does pollinate. Does it pollinate plants in BC? We don't know. We do know from some of the studies that I've read about the pallid bats that they're eating big insects, ground insects. There hasn't been that many studies done. And I don't know if anybody specifically looked to see if the pallid bat is pollinated in BC, but it does in the States. So whether it does in BC, I have no idea. But we do know it feeds on some big insects. But there's a chance we could possibly have a pollinator bat. Some research for someone at a university to look into. Yeah. Good question. How far do bats migrate? Very good question. Something that researchers are trying to understand. So bats are very small animals, as you can see. So the one in the display, the hoary bat, is our largest one in Canada. The wingspan is 40 centimeters. It hasn't been until the recent years that they've developed technology to help follow bats through migration, because the transponders can only be a certain size and the detectors are just coming out for acoustics. So I think researchers are still trying to understand that. But from what we know is that there's hoary bats that go down into Mexico. So are these bats coming from Canada and going to Mexico? Are they from the States going to Mexico? Not quite sure, but there has been some studies to show that bats are moving from Alberta into BC. So they can travel quite distances, but I don't know the exact distance. The Brazilian free-tailed bats, lots of studies been done on them. And they'll go quite huge distances in migration. And they'll move from Texas up to our Gulf Islands.
Okay, I've got a couple more, so just keep your questions, hold on to your questions for a minute. All right, are there any sound emitting devices that could be installed on the wind turbines to alert the bats to avoid that area?
So are there any sound emitting devices on wind turbines to get the bats to not crash into the turbines? There has been lots of research done on wind turbine farms, and they have used sound emitting devices and infrared cameras and lots of different things. That's not my area of expertise. I have gone to some bat conferences and I've listened to talks and I've read some papers. I know they've tried lots of things. And I know that hoary bats are still going into wind turbines. So they have tried it, but I don't know if they actually have something that is deterring bats from the wind turbines. I think our problem is them being attracted to the tall posts.
And on that note, will bats eat insects that are not flying? So
yeah, will bats eat insects that are not flying? So yes, we have species of bats that are called gleaning species. And these are more like we call them our whispering bats. So in the case, we have the Townsend's big-eared bat. It's a gleaner. And so it will fly down close along vegetation, and it can grab some insects that are on the vegetation. So ones that are not hitting underneath, that are on the surface, they can pick those up and eat them.
okay. Okay, it's a bit of a story. We had a bat or bats in our cottage on Saturna Island. We didn't want to, them inside, so we got a bat box and made and put that alternate accommodation on a tree outside. But we never see any guano or evidence the bats like their new homes. How would we know if they use the house? They are no longer in the cottage.
So we have someone on Saturna that had bats in their cabin.
In there, yeah.
They had, okay, so they had bats in their cottage. They put up a bat box, and they don't know if the bats are using the bat box, and they're wondering how do they know. So bat boxes can be great if they are done correctly. So they said that they had the bat box made. So we just want to make sure that the way that the bat box was made was done correctly. So there's lots of plans that you can find online that are not for our bats. So there are 1,500 different species of bats in the world. Our bats in BC are very specific in what they like. And they like these very small crevices. So we want to have chambers. We want to have multiple chambers on your bat boxes. We want these chambers to be 3/4 of an inch wide, maybe up to an inch wide. We need to have connection between the chambers so the bats can move forward and backwards. We need to have large chambers so the bats can move up and down. So it could be the design of the bat box that is not correct. Bat boxes can be successful on trees, but bat boxes can also fail on trees. So it depends on what type of tree they put it on. If it's shaded, if there's branches near the entrances. So I'd really have to see the situation of how the bat box was installed. But the best way to know if you have bats using your bat box would be to put a tarp underneath the bat box in, I would say, end of May, beginning of June. If you have a white tarp at the bottom, if you see any droppings, then you know that the bats would use it. The biggest problem with bat boxes is people put them up and they walk away. Every year you need to maintain these bat boxes. You have to clean out the chambers inside. If you don't clean out the chambers and they fill up with the debris or wasp nests, then bats are not going to be using these bat boxes. So just some of the stuff to think about. But it's thank you for putting up the alternate habitat and trying to help your bats. And I'm glad that you got them out of your cottage safely.
Let's see. I was wondering about the bat boxes. Are they maternity boxes?
Yeah, so the bat boxes are designed for the females to have a safe place for their young. So this is what a bat box looks like. This is the general size. So this one weighs about 23 pounds, like 3 feet tall, about 1.5 feet wide. And then inside, we got 4 chambers, and you can see how small they are. And we ask people not to paint or put mesh or anything inside the chambers, just natural wood. And it has to be scored so that the bats can climb up them.
Where are the entrance?
The bottom. So they land on this landing pad, and then they climb up. I have seen them use the vent holes on the sides to go in and out. But those are meant for venting, but I have seen them use them. Yeah, they're pretty small. This bat box can fit about 250 bats. That would be your little browns and yumas that would form those colonies. So one thing online I see all the time is, they'll give you stats about a bat box and it's like, it can hold 300 bats or it can hold 150 bats. That's not important. What you want is it to hold a colony. So there are some colony of bats that will not form colonies of 300 bats. They may only form a colony of 20 or 30 bats. And so if you only have 20 bats in your bat box and they're using it, then that's great. You've created some maternity habitat for that species. We also ask people if they're putting up bat boxes to put up more than one. That's a very limited space for them to roost. And so we want to put up multiple bat boxes in the area. And we have best management practices for bat boxes on our website that you can look at. I'll give you lots of information about them.
See, there's, okay. Are bats struggling with pesticides like birds are?
So are bats struggling with pesticides like birds are? I would think yes. I'm not familiar with any research that's being done. There may be some being done in Canada. I just haven't come across any of it. What I do know is that a lot of the studies that I've seen about pesticides in other parts of the world is that the bats will ingest an insect with pesticide and it goes into the milk. And when it's in the milk, it'll go to the pup and it will kill the pup because it gets concentrated in that fat. So pesticides are pretty bad for any animal. And even like, you put out those traps for mice or rodents and there's those non-target species, where an insect may land on it. You're trying to kill rats, but you end up getting insects in there and then the bats eat those insects and then they end up getting, the pups get poisoned from that. So, you have to be careful of those non-target.
Somebody also asks, what is the situation with white nose syndrome? I know you talked about that already. But
Yeah.
you can just repeat.
So what is the situation with white nose syndrome? So it's still spreading. Every year they're finding new locations. It's affecting more species. We have bats that are carriers that can bring it to other species. Right now in BC, we have not found the disease. As I mentioned, we just found the fungus, but it is only a matter of time before we find the disease, which is sad. Yes.
Model the migration concept. And usually something hibernates, it doesn't need to migrate. So why are they migrating if they can hibernate anywhere? Or am I muddled more than I think I am?
No, that's a good question. So the question was, why are bats hibernating if they could, why are bats migrating if they could hibernate? So we do have those 3 species that are the tree species bats that seem to be migratory species versus the hibernators. So just,
Well,
yeah, so the silver-haired one is considered a migratory hibernator. So the silver-haired bats, from our reports, the BC Community Bat Program has been around since 2012. I think really since 2016 because they did a pilot project in the Kootenays, and I think like kind of provincially it's been since 2016. From the reports that we're getting, we've learned that silver-haired bats are hibernating in people's wood piles. I mean, that was something that we didn't know about, 10 years ago. But with all the reports that we're getting, we're learning that these silver-haired bats like to go to wood piles and wood sheds and chicken coops and tree houses, and they tend to go towards wood and hibernate there for the winter time. Then they do migrate from other areas and then come here. And maybe it's because of the food. I'm just speculating here. So they're eating insects, right? So let's think you're a bat and you're in Prince George. I used to live in Prince George. I mean, we'd get snow till May sometimes. You get snow in September, right? So they need to get enough fat to either make that migratory track down to the States or Mexico, or they need to have enough fat to survive that long winter, right? So if they don't have enough food in Prince George because the cold comes on too quick, they're going to come down into Vancouver and get more insects where it's nicer habitat, right? And milder climate, and then where we lose insects, then they need to hibernate, right? This is what I'm speculating, but good question.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes, we're still learning so much about bats. When I started working with bats in 2011, there was 1,200 species. They've discovered 300 species of bats in the last 13 years. More people are interested in bats. More like when I did my research on bats, I was in a bird lab at SFU. There was nobody working on bats in BC. We now have a professor at Prince George. We have someone at Thompsons River University, and we have someone at UBC a couple of years ago. We have a lab at UBC that are studying bats, and they've been doing lots of work on bats in Vancouver. When I did my master's, there was nobody.
I've got a question because I'm seeing some interest in other people that are recording the echolocations and the communications of
Yeah.
bats. Because there's devices now that we can add to our smartphones.
Yes.
And capture that, and software that can produce spectrograms.
Yes.
But the average person, including myself, when I look at these, don't really understand what you're telling us. Is there any place where we could send our recordings and spectrograms that would help, or is it of a grade that's not worthwhile pursuing?
Not that I know of yet. So there's a question about, it's really about the Echometer Touch. So the Echometer Touch is a device that plugs into the smartphone. And I remember meeting the guy at a conference in 2013 when he was like telling me about this new thing that came out. It's pretty cool. And so you plug it into your smartphone, you download an app, and you can see the bat calls, you know, and people are walking around recording bats, which is great. And if you go to any of the Fraser Valley regional libraries, you can actually loan one for 3 weeks, which is very cool. So we're talking Delta, not Surrey, and then the rest, Langley East, you can, and Port Moody East, you can rent these bat detectors. You have to be careful because our bats in BC, some of our species look very similar. Some of our species call very similar. And so they have an overlap in their acoustics. So as you're walking around with it, so you can identify, like you just select your zone and you can put what species, and the bat detector will tell you you're listening to a little brown bat. It may be wrong. You may be listening to a Volans, which is a long-legged bat, or you may be listening to a Yuma myotis. Right, so there are some characteristics that overlap. And when you're doing acoustics, you really want to have them analyzed by a specialist. So the detectors are great in telling you, what species might be in the area. Is this an important area for the bats? But don't take it as, I definitely saw this species and this species and this species, because it could be wrong, right? They're not that accurate yet, but the technology is getting better and better. Right, so it's tricky with our species. They look a lot alike. Some of them call a lot alike. So you can use them, have fun with them, but just know that you may be watching a different type of bat. But as you learn more about bats and the habitat you're in and their behavior, you can identify it. You can start to help to identify the species. Yeah, but you have to take everything into account.
Danielle, I'm going to sneak in here.
Yes, no worries.
I think it's time to say thank you to Danielle. She's been so generous and it's been so great because I love the questions. They were all so good, weren't they? Everyone.
Well, thank you so much for all the interest, and it's so great to have this during Bat Week and
It was such
Bring
a
it.
good talk.
bringing bats into a new light.
Thank you, Danielle.